Good evening. My name is Cheryl Frank from Color Bright and Green, and I'm so excited that you all took time out of your day to come and hear about electric heat pumps and geothermal systems. And we have a very reputable speaker today. His name is Matt Corona, and he is from Climate Solutions Accelerator, and he is helping with the Heat Smart Monroe. So take it away, Matt.
Hey everyone. Oh, this is my. Sorry about that. All right, great start. Great start. Sorry everybody. So again, my name is Matt Corona. I work for the Climate Solutions Accelerator. We're a climate-focused nonprofit based in Rochester, but we're focused on the whole Genesee Finger Lakes region. I hope you can see me okay for those of you on Zoom. But Heat Smart Monroe is a program that we run. So it's an outreach campaign, and I'll talk more about it, but I'm excited you're here to hear more about it.
You're unmuted now.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. I don't know what just happened there. I guess I did it by accident. So Heat Smart Monroe is a clean heating and cooling community campaign. We're totally grant funded. We're funded by NYSERDA, which stands for New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. It's basically a state agency that's trying to move the state toward clean and renewable energy in a bunch of different sectors. So heating your house is one of those, right? Because most buildings in New York are heated with fossil fuels. And so we're not the only Heat Smart campaign. There's campaigns all across the state. You can see here on this map. We have Monroe County, but there are other organizations that are responsible for different areas of the state. So if you have friends or family across the state, there's probably a Heat Smart campaign near them. Even in the grayed out counties, we're happy to help people there too. We're not like competitive or anything. So I want to mention that we don't make any money off the interactions we have with folks. We're totally grant funded. We don't get kickbacks from the contractors. I think I said this when I was muted. So yeah, just totally a free public resource here to help people, not make money. Oh, I clicked the link. That's what happened. Okay, so why do we exist? Because we need to electrify everything. It's a crazy, daunting task, and it's kind of scary to say, but there are millions and millions of buildings here in New York State, and most of them are heated with fossil fuels because we're in a cold climate. We need to keep them warm in the winter. So, that's how they've been set up. But now we need to move them toward electrifying. So when people are in the place to replace their heating system, we need them to consider electrification. We need to replace everything we have with all electric, which is really overwhelming. And I'm not going to play this video for the sake of time, but Saul Griffith here from Rewire America is really leading this charge at the national level and in other countries as well, is to electrify everything. There's hundreds of millions of buildings here in New York State. Emissions from buildings are the #1 greenhouse gas emitter or source of emissions. So this is really important if we're going to address climate change. Okay, so we're recommending homes. This is what we want. We want homes to get heat pump ready and then get a heat pump. And I'll talk about what a heat pump is in just a second. But basically, when we say get heat pump ready, we want homes to perform building envelope improvements like air sealing and insulation, which are going to make anything you're heating with more efficient because you're keeping that warm air in your home in the winter, you're keeping the cool air in your home in the summer. You know, you want to minimize heat loss in the house because whatever system you have is going to have to work harder and harder to keep your home warm. Then after the home is air sealed and insulated, we want people to switch to heat pumps. What are heat pumps? They're all electric, very energy efficient heating and cooling devices for your home. It would replace your furnace and your air conditioner. Only got to replace one thing every 20 years or so, rather than two. So a little simpler. It's a little simpler. You get two in one. And I'll talk more about them on the next slide. So what is a heat pump? Everyone here already has one. I have one. We all have heat pumps. They're in your house already. They're called your refrigerator. So it's not a new technology. You know, heat pumps have existed for a long time. If you think about how your fridge works, it basically moves heat outside of the fridge box. So if you put your hand behind it, it feels warm. That's the heat being pumped out of your fridge and your freezer. So you can apply that same concept to your whole house. You know, heat pumps have actually existed in warmer climates for a long, long time. It's now that cold climate heat pumps built for our climate are moving, you know, into New York State, becoming more feasible. They are feasible now, you know, and now it's about breaking the technology into the mainstream, helping people find reputable contractors. So that's what we're here to do. You know, even in the dead of winter, there is thermal energy outside. So with a heat pump, you can extract that thermal energy either from the air or from the ground. And I'll talk more about different types of heat pumps on this next slide. So heat pumps are very, very energy efficient. They're all electric. One of the main differences between a heat pump and a furnace that burns fuel, a furnace creates its own heat by burning the fuel, or rather the heat is trapped, the energy is trapped in the molecules of the fuel, and when the system burns it, it releases them, and that's what heats your house. Heat pumps don't actually create any of their own heat, they just move heat from one place to another. And because they're just moving heat, that's what part of what allows them to be so efficient. So they could be 300 or 400% efficient, which means for every unit of energy you use to power the system, you're getting 3 to 4 times as much energy in the form of thermal energy that gets moved into your house. So very, very efficient. And when I say they're moving heat, these two different types, so there's two broad types of heat pump. There's air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps. And the name implies where they're moving that heat from. So an air source heat pump is a lot like an air conditioner. It looks a lot like an air conditioner. You can see over here, it's got the outdoor unit, sort of with the box with the fan in it. You know, if you have an air conditioner, you have one of those. A heat pump is almost exactly like an air conditioner, actually. They're very, very similar. There's just a few added components that allow it to pump heat in the opposite direction. And in the case of a heat pump, you have a corresponding indoor unit. If you have if your house has ductwork, you would have basically an air handler in your basement that would take the place of a furnace. You know, you wouldn't see anything on the inside of your house. If you don't have ductwork, you might get mini splits, which look like this unit right here. You know, basically, if you have radiators, it makes more sense to do a mini split system because I'll talk more about if you don't have ductwork in a few slides. But that's basically what you have if you have an air source heat pump. It would look like the outdoor unit, and then you'd have the indoor unit either in your basement or spread around your house in the form of these mini splits. A ground source heat pump is a little bit different. You don't have the outdoor unit. You do have an indoor unit. This is actually 2 of them, so you don't have one in your basement, not 2. This must be like a multi-family home or a commercial building, but this picture, that's kind of what they look like. About the same profile as a furnace, so it doesn't really take up a ton of room in your basement. They're a little bulkier, but the same footprint about. With a ground source heat pump, as I said, it's exchanging heat with the ground. So you would have, instead of an outdoor unit, you'd have some loop fields in the ground. They either are horizontal loop fields or vertical loop fields. So in the case of a vertical loop field, you need a drill rig. That would probably make the most sense if you're in the suburbs or a smaller city lot, and even really small lots aren't going to be able to do it in some cases because you need space to actually get the drill rig in there. So, in some smaller, like in the city lots, it might not be feasible to do ground source. But if you're in the country, you can do horizontal fields, which are a little bit cheaper than drilling, just as efficient. They size the loop field to the house. So, and then heat pump hot water heaters can be either ground source or air source. In the case of ground source, you have them looped right into the ground loop, so they would all be part of the same system. With air source, you would have sort of its own, the heat pump would have its own air source heat pump on it. Or, I'm sorry, the water heater would have its own air source heat pump on it. So in this picture, this upper part is the actual air source heat pump, and this is where the hot water is. Oh, so I'm just going to show, these are some graphics from a great resource, which I have a link to in the presentation. And I think for those of you who are on Zoom, we'll send the presentation out after, so you can have that. But it's called the Heat Pump Planner, and it's a document made by NYSERDA, again, that state agency that funds us. This is basically what a standard geothermal system would look like. So in the home, you can see the air handler in the basement that we kind of just talked about. With the ductwork, it's sending heat through the ductwork into the home. And here's the ground loop. So this is a horizontal loop field. You can see the loop coming out, and the salt water is the medium, would travel through those pipes. It's a closed loop, so it's not actually, there's no water actually going into the ground. It's just going through these pipes and then back into the home. So that's what a ground source basic system design would look like. And this is an air source heat pump. So very similar on the interior. And in a lot of cases, these systems are very, very similar from a user perspective. They're both going to heat and cool your house. You're not really going to notice a difference. You couldn't tell and walk in your house and be like, this house definitely has a ground source heat pump, or this house definitely has an air source heat pump. They're very similar on the inside. You've got the ductwork with the air handler again. But instead of the ground loop on the outside, you've got the outdoor unit, the air source heat pump outside. And you guys can see it's on some stilts and has a cover over it. That's for protection in the snow. And this is a ducted home. If you don't have ductwork, as I mentioned earlier, you can get a ductless system, and so I'll show one of those now. So this is this pretty similar image, just this is a ducted system. Don't read all the words over here. I just didn't want to cut them out because the lines, it would just make it look weird. So you can read this later if you want, but similar to the last graphic, you've got the outdoor unit. This is an air source heat pump leading the refrigerant line leads to a mini split. As you can see, there's no air handler in the basement because there's no ductwork. So you've got the mini split unit inside. This is like a sort of a radiator form factored mini split. You can see the different sort of form factors over here. So you can have the high up on the wall sort of looking one, the lower on the wall looking one. You can even actually hide the unit if you put like small runs of ductwork in the house. You can actually put the unit up in the ceiling or in the walls, and then just have small amounts of ductwork and custom holes for that in case you didn't want to ductwork the whole house. But it might make sense to do it that way. So maybe you can have heat directly going into 2 bedrooms or something. If just basically you'll work with a contractor. And I just also want to say, like, a contractor will help you design this. You don't have to go and think, oh, I definitely need to put a mini split here, and I would leave it up to the actual contractors to design the system. But just to give you a food for thought of what it might look like in any given home. Okay, so now I will talk a little bit about the financial differences and sort of I usually describe air source and ground source as two different investments. Two different microphones. Not treated me. Okay. I'm just going to use the. Sorry, everyone. Hello. Oh, this is so much better. Okay. So I was describing ground source and air source as two different investments, and there are some technical reasons why some homes might want to do ground source over air source or air source over ground source. But if you have the option to do both, then there are some really significant financial differences over time. So first, I'll actually talk about what they both do very similarly. So first of all, from a user perspective, as I mentioned earlier, they both provide adequate heating and cooling for the entire year. And also, when I say that, I want to mention that air source heat pumps, there are cold climate air source heat pumps, and there are conventional air source heat pumps. When I say that air source heat pumps can do heating and cooling all year round, I'm talking about cold climate air source heat pumps. And I'm not really going to talk much about the conventional ones today, so most of what I'm saying applies to cold climate heat pumps. If anyone has questions about conventional ones, we can talk about that at some point, but anyway. So cold climate air source heat pumps and ground source, heating and cooling all year round, can be, if they're designed and sized properly, will be able to meet your heat load. Even in the dead of winter, it could be -10 out, they'll heat your house. They both do hot water, so you have options for hot water with either system type. And they both have the co-benefits of getting off of fossil fuels, you reduce carbon emissions, can improve air quality. There's more and more research going into the negative effects of burning fossil fuels in our homes, especially with a gas stove, which is burning right in front of your face. Who would have thought, right? But yeah, so you both get the co-benefits. They're also quieter in a lot of cases than a furnace. They don't turn on and off, kick on and off, and are really loud and shut off, and really loud and shut off, like a lot of furnaces do. They run at constant speed. Well, they modulate the speed, but they run all the time, basically. So to get into the financial differences, the upfront costs and the operating costs are really the things we're going to look at here. So for air source, it's a very similar cost upfront to installing new natural gas and air conditioning in your home, and you have to compare it to both of those things because they do heating and cooling. So if you're going to do an apples to apples comparison, you have to say the cost of new natural gas and air conditioning, it's about the same as an air source heat pump. You might spend a little bit more on an air source heat pump. And up until recently, I would have said that the cost of operating the system would be very similar to natural gas and air conditioning. That being said, this winter was sort of an anomaly in terms of natural gas pricing for a number of reasons, geopolitical. There's also just a shortage of natural gas and other fossil fuels in general. So the prices for natural gas are up a ton, and for all fuels really. But this year was one of the first, I think the first years where it was actually a significant difference, cheaper heating with an air source heat pump than natural gas, at least on average. So will that trend continue? Maybe. I think in the long term it might. This might be a short-term spike because of some, like I said, geopolitical context, other things. But I think in the long term, both of these types of systems, electric heating with heat pumps, will become more cost-effective over time as carbon tax, other disincentives for fossil fuels come into play. So I put some asterisks there because that is likely to change. Ground source heat pumps, on the other hand, cost quite a bit more upfront, about twice as much as an air source heat pump, give or take, depending on the home and other factors, depending on whether you have to do vertical wells or horizontal. As I said earlier, horizontal is cheaper, pretty significantly cheaper. So if you can do horizontal, I recommend that just based on the cost. But again, about twice as much for any given home. But the flip side is that you get really significant savings on the operational costs in the long term. So, the basic difference is if your investment horizon is long enough, if you plan to live in the house for a long time, ground source almost always makes sense to do financially. It's just about having that long-term perspective. There's great financing out there, so you don't need all the money up front. And what I didn't mention also is that if you're not heating with natural gas, you don't have access to natural gas, it's way, way cheaper to heat with either of these types of systems. So if you don't have natural gas as an option for you, depending on where you live, heat pumps are always a good choice financially. They pay themselves off very, very fast compared to propane or fuel oil or electric resistance. Another big difference is the lifespan. So in an air source system, give or take 20 years is their expected life. Very similar to natural gas furnace, which is about 20 years as well. I've seen furnaces die shorter than that or longer than that. Air source heat pumps, again, around 20 years. Ground source heat pumps last a fair bit longer, up to around 30 years. And part of the reason for that is because they don't have the outdoor unit exposed to the elements all year round. Doesn't have to work as hard because it's using the stable temperature of the earth to heat your water or heat your air, as opposed to the very cold temperatures outside in the winter. So they're more efficient and they last longer. And when you replace a ground source system, you don't have to dig the loop field again or drill the wells, so the replacement cost is much cheaper, much less than the initial investment. Air source heat pumps are a little more flexible. You can do them in more types of homes. If you don't have ductwork, a ground source heat pump is not a bad idea, but you don't get the cooling side of the system. You can't, if you don't have ductwork and you have radiators, for example, you can loop the ground source system right into the radiators, and that you can use those to heat your house, which is great, but you can't cool the radiator I'm not going to get into it, but it would basically, there'd be water accumulation on the radiator, and it would make your home all wet. You wouldn't like that. If you don't have ductwork, an air source heat pump is probably the better option just based on cost, unless you wanted to put ductwork in your house, which is possible for some people. It's just expensive. So if you don't have ductwork, the better option in most cases is going to be air source. Lot size is also a constraint, as I mentioned earlier. You don't need a ton of space for ground source. You'd actually be surprised. A lot of people, are surprised at how small of an area they can do it on. But the bigger thing is access to that space. If they have to drill, the drill rig is pretty big. They need at least 9 feet of clearance to get the drill rig onto the lot. For most of, there's some smaller drills, but a lot of times the drillers, they can't drill deep enough with those smaller drills. So, we should say 9 feet of clearance makes sense for the house. So if you don't have that, ground source might not be feasible for you. And then in maintenance, there's not a huge difference here. Ground source doesn't need to be cleaned as often because there's no outdoor unit. So the maintenance is slightly less on those, and they're not working as hard, so they don't incur as much stress. Next slide. Okay. I didn't bring attention to this earlier, but you may have noticed the large groundhog on most of my slides and on the initial slide. The reason for that is because he's actually our spokesrodent. His name is Doug Burrows. He's great. He's our spokesrodent because him, as well as other burrowing animals, actually survive in the winter by burrowing underground. And the reason that they live under there is because under a few feet of earth, it's a stable temperature all year round. Even in the dead of winter, they can dig down a little bit and stay pretty warm. Here in Rochester, it's about 50 degrees Fahrenheit is that temperature. It varies based on your latitude, but here in Rochester, about 50. So yeah, he's a perfect spokesperson because that's the same reason that geothermal ground source heat pumps are so efficient. Is because they're drawing on that stable temperature of the earth to heat and cool your house, as opposed to the air outside, like an air source heat pump does. So Doug Burrows, he's our mascot. We love him. Okay, so to recap, why are we suggesting people get heat pumps? First of all, because we know we need to electrify everything to address climate change. So, we need to electrify our millions of buildings to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. That's what we have to do. So we're trying to make that happen faster. They're very energy efficient. Like I mentioned earlier, they're on the whole for a year, 200 to 400% efficient. Ground source heat pumps are actually even more efficient than that. And that's like sort of an average for the year. Heating and cooling, they both do heating and cooling. You only got to replace one thing every 20 years instead of two. So it simplifies your life a little bit. And it can improve your indoor air quality, as I mentioned earlier. And I want to hammer this home. If you're heating with propane, oil, or electric, please switch to a heat pump. You'll save so much money. And it's better for the climate and all the other reasons I mentioned. One thing to note, I mentioned earlier, fossil fuel prices are likely to increase over time, especially natural gas. Natural gas is artificially very cheap. There are a lot of hidden incentives that we give the utilities to provide very cheap natural gas to people. If we're moving away from fossil fuels, those are likely to go away, and natural gas will get more expensive. These are 20 years decisions that people are making. If you install a system today, you're going to have it for at least the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. So you have to predict that long in the future, which is not easy to do. But I think the writing's on the wall for natural gas. They're very convenient. If you have a mini split system, you can even do multi-zone heating and cooling, which means you can have some parts of the house hotter or cooler than others. It's great if you end up arguing over the thermostat temperature in your house. My dad really likes it really cold, and we've always disagreed about that. So it'd be nice to have this, I guess. And the reduced environmental impact, which is important to a lot of people. And there's some awesome incentives out there. That's part of the benefit of working with the Heat Smart campaign, is we can help make sure that you're getting everything that you're entitled to. First of all, there's a no-cost home energy assessment. This helps you figure out if there are opportunities to do building envelope improvements, as I mentioned earlier, get your home heat pump ready, and then to figure out what type of heat pump makes sense for your home. There's a lot of contractors that can do the home energy assessment. If you're looking at a heat pump, I recommend working with a heat pump professional, heat pump specialist, contractor that works a lot with heat pumps to do that home energy audit so they can give you an accurate recommendation for a heat pump system. There's grants for installation and air sealing. Again, we can help you take advantage of those if you might qualify. There's some that are income-based. There's some that are available to everybody. So, definitely talk to us. We can make sure you're working with the right contractors to get those grants. There's a federal tax credit for geothermal. It's 26% of the total project cost right now. That's set to go down to 22% at the end of 2023. So we've got some time at this level. So it makes a significant difference. And we'll look at some of the costs, total costs of some other projects. There's some great utility rebates. We'll also see that on a few example projects we have in the next few slides. And then there's really great financing. You can do a whole heat pump system for no money out of pocket if you wanted to. New York State has some great financing, but really you can get financing from a co-op or really a lot of banks. So there's plenty of options for financing. They're really easy to finance because, especially geothermal, because you're going to save energy, and the lenders know that. And in a lot of cases, especially if you're on propane or fuel oil, your loan payments could be lower than the amount you save on energy, meaning you're actually getting paid to install the system, basically, which is pretty cool. Okay, so how we work is we do outreach events like this. We hopefully gain some interest in this type of stuff, in heat pumps, and then you can schedule a one-on-one phone call with me where we talk about your home, what you're interested in doing. Not everybody's in the place to replace their heating system. Some people just want to see if they can make their home more energy efficient. That's great. We'd love to help you do that too. We can figure out, meet you where you're at, figure out what your needs are for your home. Schedule a home energy audit with a contractor that makes sense for what you're interested in, depending on it, whether you want ground source or air source or just insulation or whatever. Find a contractor that makes sense for that audit. Review the recommendations. I'm happy to. So from the audit, you'll get a list of recommendations from the contractor based on what they think makes sense for your home. Part of our job is to help hold those contractors accountable. So we are happy to review those recommendations with you, make sure that everything that they're recommending is rational, that the pricing makes sense, help you get multiple quotes if you want it. And then it's up to you to either make a decision, there's obviously no obligation. We just want people to get the information to make an informed decision. And then hopefully install a heat pump. So just our program resources, basically me, and our help accessing all of the other state resources, that are out there, whether it's grants or our vetted pool of contractors. We basically did a vetting process to pick companies that are specialized in heat pumps, that have been doing this for years, that are believers in technology, and that do a really good job of educating consumers, because we don't want people to have a bad experience trying to get a heat pump. So we also have us to help hold them accountable, like I mentioned, and we touch base with them weekly. So if there's any issues, we can help smooth it over or correct any misunderstandings. Here's my contact information. And there's a link to the heat pump planner and the income-based incentives from NYSERDA. So you can check those out if you want, but I'm happy to walk you through that in a phone call as well. And these are our installer partners. So we actually just recently added Halco and Simply Home Performance as two of our new contractors. We did another, redid a vetting process to try to pick more because we wanted to offer more options, and we felt that there are contractors that had entered the scene after we started our campaign that we wanted to bring on. So we did. They're also listed on our website. Halco and Simply Home Performance aren't on there yet, but they will be very, very shortly. This is a very recent update. So these are them. And like I mentioned earlier, start with a no cost, no obligation home energy assessment. I'm happy to help you do that if you schedule a phone call. You can do that on our website, or the link will also be included when we send the PowerPoint out after this. So. And now I will invite Cheryl to come up and talk about her heat pump system.
Okay, so this is my house. We have solar panels that we installed in 2012. And at the time we installed them, they covered 2/3 of our electricity. That was the size of our roof. Now I have this thing over here, which is called an electric car. And I plug it in at night in my garage. And so now our solar panels only provide 1/3 of our electricity, but I never have to go get gas. And we also have a Prius for way long distance. So those are our solar panels. And this is the solar system that lives in our basement. That will tell you how much solar we've produced, how much energy. This is our electric heat pump. That's an air source heat pump that's outside on our back patio, and you can see another picture of it there on the back patio. And this is our meter. So when you have solar panels on your roof, you get two numbers on your meter. One tells you how much you're making, and the other tells you how much you're buying. So they have to read two numbers, and it's interesting because the first time the RGB guy doesn't know how to read the meter, you get this crazy bill and you have to call. But after that, it's really nice. So yeah, we have a 1,600 square foot house. It was built about 1950, and we did put new siding on, and we didn't put a lot of insulation. We just put the house wrap that they recommend, and we did some other things like the foam insulation around the basement. We did a lot of insulation in the attic, and it's it's very comfortable. So that's mine.
So Cheryl, I have a question.
Okay.
When we lived in North Carolina, we had a heat pump, and it was 70 degrees. What I see felt was like air conditioning air on us. Ended up buying a because we felt cold all the time. And I was wondering, does the air feel warm to you?
Yeah, so she's asking me, it's Betsy, right?
Yeah.
She's asking me if the air feels cold, and it really doesn't. It feels warm. And we keep it at 64 because that's just what we do.
Yeah.
We turn it up to 68 when my dad comes over, but it does feel warm, yeah.
And here I keep my temperature like at 66 because it's higher than that. I don't know if my postmenopausal body is just too hot all the time. But
Yeah.
but I just remember that in North Carolina, and I don't know if the technology's changed or what.
So Betsy's saying that her heat pump in North Carolina blows out seemingly cold air, but that was a while ago, so probably it's the technology's changed, would be my guess.
Yeah, so how cold does it get in North Carolina where you were?
Oh, well, it's cold, it is cold in the winter, I mean, it would snow occasionally, but. Sometimes they're, not as cold as up here, but we still, we had a basement apartment, and I don't know if that should have actually been a bit warmer, what I think. But it just felt, it was just a constantly blowing the breeze that was so cold.
So there's a couple things so one thing that a lot of people, so heat pumps provide ambient heat, which is different than like a furnace. So what a heat pump does is instead of, natural gas equipment, like when the thermostat reads a certain temperature, it kicks on and like dumps heat into the house basically until it reads, okay, now it's warm enough and now we can turn off. So they like turn on up. Heat pump doesn't want to do that. It wants to run all the time at so they modulate up and down based on the need of the house. They want to slowly add just enough heat into the house to maintain the temperature that they're supposed to. So rather than turning on and off, they're always running, just kind of like sipping on a straw versus taking a gulp of water. But what I will say is that they should not leave you cold in the winter. So if it couldn't meet the temperature, that was definitely either, the system wasn't designed properly, they wasn't sized properly. And that is a real issue that we, even now deal with, and it's not the technology's fault. It's either the installation was poor, they didn't couple everything or seal everything as well as they could. Sometimes the installers aren't amazing, and it's not the technology's fault. And there's some not great contractors out there who either oversize or undersize equipment, and so those are both issues like that. We also deal with it, so that's part of why we exist, to help people work with the contractors who are really specialized in the equipment and know very well how to size and design a system for a home. So it's I don't want to scare anybody by saying that there are bad installers, but there are. So that's one of the pitfalls we try to help people avoid. And there's huge price differences between contractors, not to mention. So there's some contractors that cost a ton. I guess what I would say is that the technology's come a long way, and also maybe it was designed kind of poorly. I don't know if that was. I mean, does that sound?
And this runs through electricity.
Yeah. So they're all electric. You can basically. So if you switch to a heat pump, and you also switch, some homes have natural gas dryers or a natural gas stove. If you switch those things, you can totally shut off your gas meter. You pay about I think it's almost $30 a month just to have your gas meter turned on. So you can save what is it, almost $400 a year, $350 a year, just by getting rid of all your gas stuff. Not even, you don't have to use a single amount of therm to have to pay that charge.
Yeah. I talked to a contractor, I don't know, last year or something like that, who had talked about, if the temperature got below 20 below, that it would alternate between a heat pump and a gas furnace.
Yeah, so what was your name?
That's it.
Betsy's asking a question about hybrid systems, about a dual fuel system. So yes, that is something that a lot of contractors will recommend. I wouldn't recommend a hybrid system for most people. First of all, you're going to spend more to install it because you have the heat pump and the so there's a couple ways they can do it. You can do a natural gas furnace with a conventional heat pump, where you design the system so that around when it starts to get around freezing, then the furnace would kick in and basically do the heating, and the heat pump just does a few months out of the year. That's the way you can do it. You could do a hybrid system with a cold climate heat pump and a furnace, where you maybe undersize the heat pump so that at a certain point the furnace kicks on maybe around 20 or whatever. You don't have to do that. A lot of contractors recommend it because it's easier for them to sell the gas furnace. People already understand it. In my mind, the systems are less efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our backup is a regular electric element. So if it can't heat fast enough, like I have to keep it at the same temperature all winter, because if I raise it by more than 1 degree, the auxiliary heat kicks on, and that's a straight electric heat element, and that's really expensive. But it's there if I need it. But I have no gas in my house. I got rid of the gas meter, and I save $20 a month not having that in there. I also have electric hot water heater that runs off the heat pump as well.
So you keep it at steady, you don't turn it down at night, turn it up.
I don't turn it down at night because it might have been a good idea when I had a gas furnace, but it's not anymore.
So it just stays at this.
It stays at 64, 65, 63, like all the time, except for my dad comes over. I start turning it up a couple hours before he gets there, so I don't have to kick on the auxiliary heat.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because, like I said earlier, how it's more like sipping on a straw. When you change the temperature a bunch, the heat pump is like, oh no, I need to ramp up to meet this temperature quickly. So it will use auxiliary heat, whatever it is, whether it's a furnace, electric furnace, or a gas furnace. You can do a hybrid system. It's possible. I wouldn't recommend it. There is one scenario where I think it makes a lot of sense though, where if you have a relatively new gas furnace or other furnace, and it would make sense to replace a pretty new thing, because again, they last about 20 years. You can install a cold climate heat pump to basically do the majority of the heating, and you'd have the you'd have the heat pump do the heating and the cooling, and then the furnace would act as an air handler. So instead of having to install another unit in your basement for the air source heat pump, you basically use the furnace as the fan from the furnace to distribute the air. So you can save a little bit of money in installation if you have a relatively new gas furnace. If you want to do cold climate heat pumps, you can basically reuse the system you already have and just add the outdoor unit. So you save around 40 to 50% of the install cost if you did it that way. But if you have to replace both heating and cooling at the same time, I would recommend just straight cold climate heat pump. You can do the electric, and if you have a ducted system, most systems will come with the electric backup built in already, because at some point, it gets if it got -20, for example, the system would probably be working as hard as it could, and at that point, it would need that backup just to make up the difference it would to stay at temperature. But if a system is designed and sized properly, it will almost never, if ever, have to do that. That being said, some hybrid systems are designed for that to be the case. I would recommend it.
There's 3 questions online. We have about 12 minutes left.
Okay, I do have a couple more slides that I'll run through so quickly, and then I will address your questions. No, you're good. No, it's good questions because it's like a lot of people ask that. So, okay, really quickly, I just wanted to show you a couple example projects. So, the system that Cheryl just talked about was an air source system. As I mentioned, there's a financial nuance between this, and this is a geothermal ground source heat pump. So different costs as an air source heat pump. They're more expensive, like I said earlier, but you can see how much of the difference the incentives made. So don't worry about all this information. This is just the type of equipment it was, and they got a hot water heater, the heat pump. There's the loop fields, but I want you to look at the project cost and the incentive breakdown. So that 26% federal tax credit was almost $11,000, quite a bit of money. The system outrun was 41,000. That's a crazy big number. It's a lot of money. But after those incentives, they got pretty much $17,500 knocked off. It came down to just under $24,000, which again is still a lot of money. And like I said, they are expensive. They're the more expensive option, but they paid themselves off in the long term. But you can really see like the incentives really significant. That's about maybe like 40% of the project cost, which is pretty crazy. This was a 1,500 square foot home, built in 1900. So you can do an older home. Like I said, you should get it heat pump ready, doing building envelope improvements. But yeah, doesn't have to be a new super efficient home either. This is just another one. This is a home in Penfield, 2,400 square feet, built in 1960. Again, in this case, the initial cost was $47,000. Oh my God. But after the incentives, again, took off about 17,500, 17,600, came down to 29,600. That's like way cheaper. It's still a lot, you know, and I recognize it's a lot of money and it's probably still cost prohibitive for a lot of people. But with the financing, with the you know, the energy savings you'll see, it makes sense in the long term. So this is just food for thought. Again, this is ground source, the more expensive option. Air source heat pumps are way cheaper, about half or less. And here's some data just on the heating costs for geothermal. So this was heating and cooling. This was a house in Mendon, newly built, 3,500 square foot home, pretty big house. Only cost for heating and cooling the whole year $675. So that's about like $60 a month to heat and cool your house. That's like amazing throughout the whole year. And you can see in the summer, like in October, it ran, you know, almost had nothing. You know, the majority of the costs were in January, February, and March, it looks like, and December. So heating load is definitely cost more than cooling. You can see over here on the left, cooling cost them about $150 for the year. Not bad at all.
This is a house without solar panels.
No solar panels, yeah. And here's one more. Here's in Rush. This is not a brand new home. This is a 2,300 square foot house, but it was well insulated before they did the heat pump. Only $620 for the whole year. So again, you know, very cost effective to heat and cool with this throughout the year. Year over year, you're going to make your money back. And I just wanted to share about two upcoming events. First, we're having a geothermal social, is what we're calling it. But we'll do a little bit of learning, and then we'll release some tours into see the Henrietta Public Library's geothermal system. So the whole Henrietta Public Library is heated and cooled geothermal. So we'll get some tours into there to see their system, and we'll talk about how it works. That's on April 14th at 6:30 p.m. And then we have an online webinar series. It just started on the 17th, but there's events every 2 weeks. They're really short. They're only, you know, usually about a 20-minute presentation and Q&A. So it's really biteable. And we missed the induction cooking one, but that's online if you want to get the video. And the next one is Heat Pumps 101. And then there's other ones. We are doing the presentation on energy efficiency on April 20th. So please join those if you can. Yes.
Okay.
Q&A time.
All right. So the first question.
Deb says, I have a boiler heater with radiant heat and the hot water heater is connected to it. I have an old outdoor air conditioner with vents in ceiling. Could an air source be connected to a new air conditioner?
So the air source system would basically replace the air conditioner. So if you have radiant heating, you can't really do air source. There's not really a good, okay. It exists that there are air to water systems you can do. You can't really do it here only because there's not contractors that do it yet. They're doing it in other states, sort of in the experimental phase. So you couldn't really do air source with the radiant. Oh, I'm sorry. Not that you can't do air source. I'm so sorry. You couldn't do a ducted air source system. You'd have to do mini splits basically. And in that case, you'd be replacing your air conditioning. Do you have ductwork?
Oh, the air. This
Okay,
is Deb.
interesting. So yeah, I mean,
so there's
okay, so there's two options, I guess. You can go all mini splits and not use the ductwork, or the radiant heat, or you can go, if the ductwork is comprehensive and goes around the whole house, you can scrap the radiant heat and do the ducted air source heat pump. So I guess you have a few options there. And we can talk more about that. You could probably, I think, talking to a contractor to figure out which of those is going to make more sense and maybe be more cost effective. But just food for thought, I guess. Does that answer your question?
no. No, the heater is
David
gas.
is asking, we have a 5-year-old high efficiency gas furnace that works fine, plus a conventional AC. Is there a place that could use them, or would they just be scrapped if we got a heat pump?
That's a good question. Every contractor is different. Some will scrap all their old equipment. Almost none, I don't think any contractors will reinstall them in homes. I know a lot of contractors sell the equipment on Craigslist or sell it used on the used market to, so a lot of landlords buy older equipment to, install in their, if they have a dozen properties or something. So it depends on the contractor. If that was a concern of yours, we could definitely find a contractor that is gonna do something with the older equipment and not just scrap it. So if that's something you want us to do, we can definitely make sure that's addressed.
So our contractor sold our old equipment to a different customer.
Oh, really?
He did. Okay. Is air source water heating better than on-demand electric water heater?
I guess I'm not sure, I'm going to break apart the word better because I want to say yes in that it's probably cheaper. I think air source heat pump, hot water, or heat pump, hot water heater is probably the cheapest way to heat your hot water. If you can do it in ground source, it's like by far cheaper than anything else. But even air source hot water heaters are very, very energy efficient. It's hard for me to say. I've actually never experienced the electric on demand hot water. I don't know how, from a, if it works really well, then it would probably work just as, if it keeps all your, meets your hot water need, then that's great. I don't know how well they perform in terms of actually delivering hot water as much as you need, but air source hot water heaters, I had one of those actually, and it works great. I take long showers, and I've never had a time where I didn't have hot water, or it got colder when I was showering or anything like that. So that's just from my perspective.
Okay, and then John is asking, one geo driller told me there were problems drilling in bright gas and water issues. Is that anyone else's experience?
Yes. Yes. So there's been issues. So we are on a Rochester, geologically under us, we're on a karst field is what it's called. It's basically like a network of underground caves that are kind of snaking around, and they're super unpredictable. There's not really a good map from any geologists of where these caves are. Some of them have gas in them, some of them have water in them. It's really difficult to know. The drillers are still experimenting on where is okay to drill, how far they can drill in some places. Sometimes they can drill really deep and then they move a well 30 feet in one direction. They can only drill to 100 feet or even less because they hit some geological feature, whether it's really tough to dig through rock or it's water or gas. Brighton, it's commonly known that it's a little challenging to drill in Brighton. There have been some projects where water and silt, like, you know, basically geothermal drilling is not pretty, I'll say. In most cases, it's pretty dirty. It's gonna like mess with your garden a little bit if you've got a drill near it. But they, you know, the contractors do a great job of, you know, reconciling that dirtiness after they leave. But yeah, I mean, there is such a high demand for drilling right now that a lot of drillers have the freedom to reject certain jobs, which is like not uncommon. And Brighton is known to be a little challenging to drill in. So that's definitely a challenge in the industry. We'd have to ask them, you know, they turn down jobs sometimes, they take other jobs that we're not expecting them to do. So that could be a challenge here in Brighton, but I don't want it to dissuade anybody from at least investigating the option, because it's not, doesn't mean it's impossible.
Right. I think Deb is clarifying her question. She has two systems: a boiler for heat and hot water heater with radiators in the floor, and then her other system is an air conditioner outside with vents in the ceiling. And she's asking if an air source heat pump, I assume, can be connected to the air conditioner.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure if it would make sense to leave the existing outdoor unit and just add on to what you have. You could definitely reuse the ductwork, if not all of it, then at least parts of it. It's hard for me to say exactly what would be the most effective option for you, because you know, I'm not there, I haven't seen it. You know, the ductwork, if it's only a part of the house, might work for, you know, you could do maybe what we talked about earlier. I showed the unit in the wall where you have some of the ductwork connected to the mini split in the wall. You could, you know, replace the boiler with an air handler and run ductwork to the rest of the ductwork if it's, you know, comprehensive enough where it goes around the whole house and it can distribute heat effectively. I mean, the short answer is yes. The long answer is I don't know exactly what it would look like in your house, but that's what the home energy audit is for. We can get a contractor to assess those things and kind of figure out what the best option is and then give you a proposal. So, yes.
Right. Are there any other questions tonight for Matt? Not from the house. Are there any from the Zoom? The Zoom or the room? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for joining us. That was great. We really appreciate you coming. And thank you, everyone who came. And we will have the recording and the slides up on the website. Probably give us a week or so, because we're all volunteers. We're not professional technology people, but we'll get it up on the website, colorbrightandgreen.org. And I hope you all have a wonderful night.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.